Concordia University is on the traditional territory of the Ghanaian Gehaga, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. The Concordia Student Union recognizes and respects the Ghanaian Gehaga as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So hello everybody. As far as the call to order goes, there's a sign-in sheet for those of you who haven't yet signed in or picked up your placards. I can go straight to roll call here. There are a few updates as far as resignations and requests for excusals, but maybe before I get into that, I actually prepared a little chairperson's report, which unfortunately I only sent out about half an hour ago, so I apologize for that. But it's regarding absences and requests for excusals, which seems to have become a bit of a sticking point in our meetings. So I just would like to read this out for you folks for the sake of context, and I'm sure a lot of you already appreciate a lot of what I'm about to say. So as some of you may recall, last regular council meeting's most contentious agenda item was roll call, specifically requests for excusal from councillors. This is a bit unusual and ideally could be avoided with procedural clarity. Standing Regulation 60 to 66 clearly delineate how excusals are to be handled and, importantly, what constitutes a valid reason for a request. What is important to consider is that these are standing regulations, the second most binding set of procedural guidelines at the CSU. It's strongly recommended that Council not stray from the standing regulations as best as it can. While a notwithstanding clause exists in order to act in disaccord with them, this provision is meant to be used in cases of utmost urgency. Procedurally, to pass a motion in violation of these standing regulations requires a 3/4 majority of positive votes, which is a fairly steep measure meant to ensure its responsible usage. This has not been the procedure employed at Council, specifically for roll call, and for this I'm at fault. I've not been fully diligent, thinking that roll call would be a minor enough point to quickly resolve and move on. But as roll calls become something of a recurring conversation, following the letter of the law seems to me to be an appropriate start to resolving the challenges experienced. The requests for excusals merit usage of our notwithstanding clause. Ultimately, of course, the decision is up to you folks, up to Council. But I can provide a certain degree of context, that these regulations are not seen by the CSU as antiquated or at least a bit out of touch with the reality of council meetings. They're in place as a necessary evil of sorts to ensure active council participation. Without wanting to sound overly dramatic or harsh, it's expected that all CSU councillors and executives attend regular council meetings. You've been chosen by your respective constituents to stay abreast of what's happening in Concordia, to make decisions and judgment calls on their behalf, etc. Regular absence, barring appropriately defined reasons, is meant to be reacted to with removal after 3 missed meetings for councillors. I'm sure many of you are fully aware of what I just reiterated, but I felt nonetheless that a reminder of the spirit of our standing regs could help further inform deliberation and votes regarding attendance. So thank you for bearing with me for that point. I'll begin with resignations. We've actually had 2 resignations submitted to me since last regular meeting of Malin and Vicky, who have resigned from their posts and have sent me their official letter of resignation. As far as requests for excusal go, tonight we have 2. The first coming from James, who writes, "Hi Matt, I'm unable to attend today's council meeting. I'm stuck writing papers this evening. I'm therefore sending my regrets to council. Best regards, James." The second coming from Caroline, who writes, "Hi Matt, just to let you know that I will not be able to attend this meeting as I have had to attend a funeral. Thank you, Caroline." So those are the 2 requests for excusal. Yes, Ben?
I move to excuse Caroline.
Okay, so I'm proposing a motion to excuse Caroline from today's meeting. Seconded Matthew. Okay, so we can proceed to a vote then. All those in favor, raise your placards. Okay, those opposed? Abstentions? Great, that carries. Yes, Ben?
I want to move to approve all the late documentation I was sent out. Because technically we have to approve it at the meeting in order for it to be subject to deliberation.
Yeah, sure. So what Ben was discussing is a lot of the documentation that was sent before the due date of submission for the council call-out. So this needs to be voted to be approved as part of the discussion, as part of the formal meeting of council. So that's a motion to include those that documentation. Seconded by Jason. Is there anyone who has any objections to this? Otherwise, it can be passed by unanimity. Okay, correct. So the content of everything that's been sent through the council mailing list will be as part of today's council meeting. Yes, Ben.
I move to add the point annual general meeting to new business substantives.
Okay.
And if I could just, after a second, speak to it just quickly.
If I could just hold off, there's one more thing I have to address with roll call first.
Oh, sorry.
No
Sorry,
problem.
we're still on roll call. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's coming right up. So as far as roll call, this is regarding an executive's submission of documents, I think for a perfectly valid reason, but maybe Anthony, I'll let you speak to that.
Yep. So yeah, I did not submit my external report or my external meeting report. External meeting, I can give an update about that afterwards. I'm going to add an agenda point about external later on in the informational. The reason was I started writing something and I totally forgot to finish it up and send it over, and only realized that in the last 24 hours, and I've not had the time in the last bit to finish it up and send it over. So that's my excuses for not submitting the documents. Alright.
Okay, and does that come with a request for excusal? As per the standing regulations, this would come with
this
a...
next request for excusal. And I'll give an update about what I've been doing in a later point in the agenda that I'll add after this meeting.
Okay. So that is a motion to excuse the non-submission of Anthony's documents, which incidentally, according to the standing regulations, comes with a fairly hefty fee. Seconded, Jason. Does anyone have any opposition to excusing Anthony? Okay, great, that passes by unanimity. Does anyone have anything else as far as roll call goes? Now we can proceed to approval of the agenda. Okay, great. Ben, I think you said you wanted to add a point?
I move to add annual general meeting to new business substantive, or, yeah, new business substantive.
Is there anywhere on new business you'd particularly want this?
Yeah.
Last point? Okay. Make it point G, annual general meeting, AGM. Yeah, Gabe.
Move to remove the judicial board point from the agenda.
Okay, yeah, that's right. The person who wants to present herself was not able to make it to this meeting. So appointments, judicial board is needs to go on the agenda. Any other changes to the, yeah, there.
I move to pull policy committee report, March 31st, to new business substantive.
Okay, the policy committee report, anywhere in particular on new business?
Why not at the start? Get out of the way.
Suppose we can do that right away. Policy committee reports. Thank you very much. Anthony.
I'd like to add a point in informational substantive, what is it? New business informational. External campaigns update.
Okay. Can I make that point C?
Sure.
Campaigns update, thank you very much. Okay, any further changes to the agenda? Okay, great. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Oh, sorry. Lucy didn't see it before. Okay, that's a motion by Lucy. Seconded, Jason. So those in favor of approving the consent agenda and today's agenda, please raise your placards. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Great, that carries. So we no longer have a point for appointments, which takes us right into new business informational, point 8A, starting with elections.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to really quickly go over it, the elections. So first of all, I guess I'm going to congratulate the new people who have been elected. So that's a lot of people in the room, but anyways, Terry and his team, Marion, lots of counselors. So anyways, that's really exciting. It looks like we're going to be in good hands next year. Besides that, all the referendum questions relating to the major projects passed. The only one that didn't pass was relating to the health plan. It's not tragedy right now that wasn't passed either. What because when we passed special bylaw K, that reduced the administration fee, which means that the total cost for the overall plan is about $7 per person less for the entire year, which means that we can actually maintain our current level of coverage anyways for the time being, just barely, and have a small amount left over for reserve as well, despite the fact that this question failed. So had the special bylaw K not passed, then we would have to probably reduce, well, we'd probably just have to reduce our admin fee anyways, to be honest, but so it seems as though this question will need to be asked in the future, or the health plan will need to be reduced, or the dental plan will need to be reduced. Besides that, I just wanted to have this as a point in case people have questions. We're waiting on the CEO's report still, and then we'll ratify that report at the AGM and probably at the council meeting as well, actually. So that's that. If people have questions, now would be the time, I guess.
Yeah, the floor is open for discussion. Any questions you might have? Okay, well, thank you for that update. If there's nothing further, we can move on to the next point for informational points, which is the strike.
I wrote quite a bit about it in my exec report. Essentially, I've been kind of working with Solidarity Concordia to try to develop positions and things like this as long as they're in line with ours, but we have a pretty broad position opposed to the budget cuts, so there hasn't been very many complications with that. The position that we've basically been forwarding, and I've communicated this in the background with council, is that I've been defending the mandates that are derived through general assemblies. Essentially, the logic is really simple, that their structure is the same as ours, so a threat to their democratic process is a threat to ours. So we've been, well, I've put myself somewhat on the front lines there too, to act as a witness, but also a participant, so that the union is also with individuals that are putting themselves in lines for their association. This is a message to the university and to the public in general, whoever's paying attention, that if there is targeting of individual students who are upholding their own mandates, then we're also involved as the CSU, and that puts a significant amount of, it puts a lot more resources behind these students, because essentially, I mean, we're by far the largest association on campus by like almost exponentially. We have way more resources than other people, so to put us into this alongside the smaller associations, I think is definitely really helpful for people that are upholding their mandates. I mean, besides that, I've put a lot of information in our report. If people have questions, I can go into more detail. It's obviously still ongoing for certain departments. I'm going to continue focusing on this pretty heavily to make sure that there aren't like student casualties. Yeah, and I'm always open to input, so I gave my number to council if they wanted to contact me. Yeah, so feel free to ask questions or concerns or anything like that. I could address things right now.
I'll keep the floor open for just a moment as I'm updating the agenda and sending it to you on the Facebook group.
I guess I'll just add to that. I went to the first round of General Assemblies. Pretty much, I went to, I'd say, the majority of the first round of General Assemblies, so I had a pretty good feeling of where those students are at on the issue too.
Okay, well, if there's nothing further, we can move on to the next point. And I just sent you the wrong updated minutes, so I'll get to work on that. While we get to point C, the campaigns update.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to give a quick update on campaigns, since what's going to be happening in the next few weeks and what's happened in the last couple of weeks. So we're done the speaker series for the year. All the major speaking events are finished. We finished with the Bandana Shiva event and Dominique Champagne, as well as the Yes Men. Both events, at least the Bandana Shiva event, was completely packed. There was too many people, then we had to some people couldn't get in. The Yes Men was almost totally packed, so there were two very, very successful events. And that kind of topped off our big event in H110 for the year. And now we have another big event happening this weekend. So we have the Act on Climate March. So I don't know if y'all received the email at the CSU email last week, themed around the climate march, but we're getting buses, about 5 buses to get Concordia students to Quebec City for the climate march. There's about 100 buses leaving from around Quebec, some from the rest of Canada, to march in Quebec City in the lead up to this meeting with the premiers of all the provinces. We're going to talk about climate change on April 14th. So that's going to be quite a big event, and actually we've had so many requests for buses that we don't actually have enough buses get all the students that wanted to go. But we'll be able to pack about 5 buses to go. The GSA is also renting buses, Dawson Student Union, McGill, and we're all leaving from Concordia Saturday. So if anybody's interested in getting on a bus Saturday to come to Quebec City, let me know, and I can see if I can get you on the waiting list to make sure that we can get as many people as possible, especially from council. The night of, we're renting a big, right after the demonstration, we're renting a big auditorium, and there we're going to be having a talk about hydrocarbons and fossil fuels. We're inviting a lot of groups that are working on the front lines against hydrocarbon projects in Quebec to come give speeches and talk about the next steps that the movement needs to take to really get the government to go back on these hydrocarbon projects and heed the call of the United Nations to leave the fossil fuels in the ground to avoid dangerous climate change. That's going to be happening on Saturday. And the buses are going to come afterwards, so we're expecting about 750 to 1,000 people to be attending this talk. That's organized by the coalition that we're part of, the Csu April Students Against the Pipelines. In the next 2 months, we're organizing a speaking tour across Quebec. We're doing about 10 to 15 cégep and universities in the span of 2 weeks to talk about the coalition and the hydrocarbon projects in the province. And then we're also going to be signing up students for a training weekend that we're doing in a forum at the ending of May, and we'll send that information to all of y'all soon. But it's basically around climate change and fossil fuels, and we're going to probably expect about 200 to 400 students. It's a conference being organized in Quebec City to talk about the plan of action for next year around climate change and fossil fuels. So we're doing the work of getting as many people interested in this as possible at the climate march with our talk at the ending of the day, then the campus tour, and then we're also going to be sending out an email to register students for this camp and get people to be very well versed in the human rights issues, public health issues around fossil fuels, and what we can do about it, and so that to help get the ground ready for next year when there will likely be an increase in mobilization around hydrocarbons. This has been being talked about a lot in campuses across Quebec. A lot of strikes in the campuses are not just about austerity, but also against the fossil fuel economy and the continuation of our use of petroleum and expansion of the tar sands. And also in Quebec, just yesterday, the government announced its intent to approve extraction projects for shale gas fracking and as well as oil off the coast of the Gulf. So now it seems like they're intent on doing that. So there's definitely going to be an increase mobilization in the next year or so. And we're working with other campuses right now. The coalition now has over 15 student associations from across Quebec that are joined onto it. And there's going to be a couple of votes coming up in the next couple of weeks, but we're one of the largest coalitions right now in the province around hydrocarbons and fossil fuels. So that's a bit of an update about the work that we've been doing. We've been pretty heavily involved working with other campuses on this and making sure that this all goes along smoothly. Any questions? That was good.
Well, thanks for the update. Nothing further, we can go to new business substantive. The first, which was pulled from the consent agenda by Terry, is the policy committee report.
Yep. Great, so I pulled the policy committee report just because there were changes made to the standing regulations, so just for best practice, I figured we would discuss them here at council before adopting them. Does anyone have any questions before I start reading them out? All right, so for the most part, it's just housekeeping. The first one has to do with changing the recount margin of victory from when votes are less than 50 to less than 15 for councillors, because we found that 50 in certain elections, let's say by-elections and things, might be too large of a margin where, you know, it would effectively force the CEO to count many of the candidates when in fact, you know, 50 proportionally could have been a very large margin. So the second standing regulation change also has to do with the elimination of the independent senator position. In the past, I don't know why this was allowed, but the CSU had in its standing regulations that during the general election, one member from each faculty would be elected to Senate, including that of an independent student. However, in Senate's own bylaws, it doesn't allow independent senators to sit on Senate because they don't have like a faculty dean and things like this. They just don't fit into the structure. So the CSU is the umbrella that represents independent students. However, in the capacity of being a student senator, it's just not applicable. So I'm very glad that no independent student has been courageous enough to run for the Senate position through general election. So we didn't have to deal with the issue of notifying them that they're actually ineligible due to their student status. So we've just eliminated that, and what we've done is we've added an additional appointed senator seat to the category under those who are appointed by council. So besides that, at the very start of our mandate, we kind of made a wish list of just general long overdue housekeeping measures that should have been implemented in terms of our standing regulations at the CSU. And we finally have come to a time when we can start tackling some of those things. So what we've done is we've eliminated the miscellaneous book in the CSU just to make things a little less heavy in terms of the layers and categories. So we've moved the chapter about the annual retreat into book 1, and it's very straightforward. It's written out in the policy committee report. So is there any questions about anything that I raised? Yeah.
Well, not specifically what
sorry.
you raised, but
Yeah.
should a counselor wish to contribute or make amendments, he would have to address the policy committee?
Yeah, that would be okay. That would be the best way to go about it, just because I don't think it's an effective way to address policy changes in a room full of 40 people. Like, it's better to deal with that in a committee setting. So if you would like to sit in on policy committee meetings, like, that's not a problem. Or before, like, when the documents get sent out, if there's something that you have or you would like to follow up with, then, you know, contact the chair of the committee and they can, you know, handle your question or provide more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on a last point, is there a limitation to what can be done by the policy committee? Or is there any ratification? Is there anywhere in the process where this council here, fully assembled, could review what was done by policy committee? Or is it just customary for you guys to act on your own?
Well, usually we receive our mandates from council. Mm-hmm. So, for example, let's say in the past we've had council mandate policy to review certain elements of our standing regulations and then report back to council. Mm-hmm. It's just to get into the minutia of the standing regulations at this level of deliberation is just ill-advised because of how, you know, usually there are specific individuals who are very key as to the wording and things like this, and it's just, it's a better setting in committee to be dealing with these things, but I think Lucy has something to say as well.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that, I mean, this entire process of having the policy committee reports and bringing it to council does act as that fail-safe where nothing goes through without being approved. So if a councillor does read through the report and sees those points, maybe those can be clarified, but it's like Terry said, like this kind of work would just get out of hand if it wasn't done within the committee setting, but these aren't shadowy committee meetings, so.
Okay. So that answers everything, thank you.
Okay, continue.
I move to approve the policy committee report.
Oh, sure, I thought you were going to give the update, yeah. Okay, so there's a motion to approve the policy committee report. Seconded Ben. All those in favor of approving the policy committee report, please use your placards. Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, great, that carries. Yes, Ben?
I'm just speaking to the next point whenever it comes.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, we're on the next point, which is a positions point, increasing government revenues. Okay, never mind then. Terry, why don't you
Okay,
do that?
yeah, great. So I drafted up these positions just because in the recent past, I've had the opportunity to speak with many students, and in discussing some of the positions that were being adopted through referendum, one having to do with privatization of services, and the other one is cuts to the public sector by the government. Folks were looking for more, I guess, solutionary positions from council, as opposed to just being opposed to government policy, like what kind of policy are we in favor of. So I feel that these two positions that I've put forward here represent a lot of what we would like to see, considering the mandates that we've been given to us from the student body through referendum. So the first position that I'm proposing we adopt is that we increase the number of tax brackets in a progressive manner as a way to raise government revenues. Basically that could achieve a zero deficit budget through a way that doesn't cut public services but adds the amount of money the government's taking in every year. So currently we have a very small range of tax brackets, like between $40,000 and I believe it's around $120,000, $150,000. But I'm sure all of us can appreciate that the lifestyle lived by someone making $150,000 is quite disparate from someone making $1 million. So why don't we include additional tax brackets on the higher end of the scale to share the wealth, if that's not the good right terminology to be using. Okay, and the second one is also very straightforward. It just has to do with the CSU adopting a position against federal and provincial government subsidies, subsidies to fossil fuel related companies. So what's taking place now is the government's prioritizing where they put their money, and instead of putting money into hospitals, daycares, and schools, they're giving a subsidy to these exploitation-related industries, such as energy companies like fossil fuels. So it's a little bit more clear in the motion themselves, but basically what it discusses is it uses some examples like the planned oil resource extraction activity, and all of this is the object of all of this is to raise the revenues of the government as an alternative to cutting public sector services. Yeah. I just forgot to know
Yeah, go ahead.
the positions and support.
I move to approve the position in support of increasing government revenues.
Okay, I hear your motion. I'm just going to ask really quickly as far as procedurally how we're going to operate. I'm looking at the standing regulations regarding the positions book, and standing reg 80 says that positions may be adopted by council or directly by the members in a general meeting or a referendum. As far as this being it's a regular meeting of council, I don't know if that constitutes a general meeting, however.
I'm quite sure that there's a rule that says that they can also be adopted by council. Because a lot of the positions in.
I'm also looking at, standing reg 86, which means says additional additions to the policy book, positions book rather, shall be included in the consent agenda for the next regular meeting of council for ratification in the case of resolutions. So we could, as council, vote for it and have it be ratified at the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
That's to put it into the policy book, yeah, so I guess, if I may.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it's not yet in the policy book, and then once we take the position, we put it in the policy book, and then the policy book itself with the new position will be ratified with that new one in it. So
Okay.
it's a little bit weird, but I think that's.
No, that's clear to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Couldn't hear that.
Basically, what I was saying is that we would approve of a position, but then we would have to add it to the positions book afterwards, and then the new positions book would be ratified at the next meeting. So it's in the consent agenda, so not like another discussion unless somebody wants to pull it out.
Okay, great. So that's the motion to approve the policy just discussed. Terry, is that seconded?
Yeah, I just wanted to add some clarification as well. So the reason why it's checked twice is because sometimes wording of positions adopted can be interpreted in different ways. So it's just to make sure that everyone sees once again what the final wording of a position that's adopted and how it's being put into the positions book, because it's very nuanced. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think that's now clear for everybody,
Yeah.
including me. Okay, I mean, is there any motivation you'd like to add, Ben, or can we proceed to discussion?
I mean, this doesn't limit our, like, when we speak about increasing government revenues, that wouldn't mean that this is the only thing that we can ever set our sights on. It's just one position. That's it. I mean, Terry, I think, spoke to it already, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. The floor is open. Yep, Marion.
I would encourage us to support these motions because I think that students do want to hear about concrete solutions, and we did have a lot of support in the questions that were run in the past 2 elections, and so I think this is a great step in thinking about how to concretely bring ideas to back up these ideas, these positions. Sorry.
Well, if discussion is exhausted, we can proceed to a vote then. All those in favor of adopting a position, please raise your placards. Those opposed? And abstentions? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. So Terry, does that finish the point for positions?
Yeah, unless people have questions.
Okay. Then we can move on to point C, the Ruderville project. I'm not sure who's speaking to this first, but Ben?
I moved to table until, I know that the group is just waiting on one more person to arrive who finishes class at 7:30, so if we could table it until that person arrives. I'm not sure at which point that will be. Is that possible?
Just motion for Reggie's to work on one.
Or I could table it until after Reggie's, I guess.
I mean, you could also propose a motion to table the motion indefinitely, at which point, once the person returns, there can be a motion to have the point addressed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which would involve suspending Robert's rules since we're
Okay.
making any points.
Instead, just have it be after Reggie's. Move to table it until after Reggie's project point.
Okay. All right, so the motion being proposed is to then table the Ruderville project until after the next speaking point, which is Reggie's project. The second, Jason? Okay, those in favor, please raise your placards. Okay, those opposed? Abstentions? All right, that carries. Okay, so we'll be addressing the point of Reggie's then.
Okay, that's me. Basically, this motion is to put aside the $1.8 million recently voted by students for the Reggie's project in escrow with our lawyer, as requested by Peter Bola, Associate Vice President of Facilities.
Okay, so does that include the motion then, or?
Yeah, well, I read the motion, right? And then I
Yep.
motivate?
Okay,
Okay,
is there,
so that's the motion.
okay, thank you very much. Is there a seconder? Thomas? Okay, motivate.
Sure, I will motivate. So, I mean, we're in constant conversation with the administration regarding the Reggie's project, and I suppose our most recent, where we're at with it is that it's going to tender. We're taking out all the stuff. We're like really happening, this amazing construction project that we've been waiting for forever. And, but the university is, I mean, they want to make sure that we have the money to pay for this project. And so they have asked us to put it in escrow. So we did the same thing for the CFS case. We put some money in escrow with the lawyer who handled that, which was Philip Tessier, our main legal advisor of the CSU. And so, yeah, this is just a procedure so that the university administration is confident that we have the money to pay for it. And I think it's also a good move for us because then it ties the university to uphold their part of the bargain also on this project.
All right, thank you very much. The floor is open for questions. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we can proceed to a vote. All right, those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. That carries. Thank you very much. I believe that our last guest has arrived, so we can... Oh, yeah, please.
I just have some updates about Reggie's project, which she basically went
Oh,
over
okay.
with the motion, but it's just like information for the councillors that are present. So essentially now we're in the tender process, which means that all the plans are finalized, according to ventilation, electric, and everything that has been processed by the certificate firm. So this being said, we have found 7 contracting companies that are in a process of producing some sort of appel d'offres. So they're going to evaluate our project and see how much they can charge us for it. So with these 7 different contracting firms, we're going to see which one has the lowest cost, and we're going to contract this firm. So that happens on April 17th. So it's like a 2 weeks process. Afterwards, as of May 15th, both space will have to be completely emptied. Actually, 3 space, so the hive, the Reggie's, and the basement. From there, the space will be emptied and be ready to be taken care of by the contracting firm. So as it stands, we're still evaluating the needs for the AV equipment. We have received the permit for the opening of the window. I'm just like bombarding you with a whole bunch of information just so you know a bit more where we're at. So we had like asked for a permit in order to actually open up the wall that separates the Reggie's terrace and the Reggie's space, and that had to go through a whole process of approval, and it passed, so that's great. And other than that, we're still in contact with different beer companies, and we're also talking about the maintenance program, so contracting for the maintenance of the equipment or maintenance of the infrastructure and whatnot. And then I think that's as much information that is relevant for this meeting. Is there any other questions?
Thanks for that, Kate. That's all for that point, then we can proceed to the Bruteville project, because I believe all of our guest speakers have arrived. Would anyone like to speak to the point directly?
Which computer? Show me these.
Maybe just take a few moments so that they can set it.
Yeah, there's going to be a few minutes of setup, folks, just as the presentation gets ready. Floor to you. Maybe you can introduce yourselves and let the presentation begin. Great.
Hi everybody, my name is Lauren. I'm a coordinator for the Concordia Food Coalition, and among many projects I've been focusing a lot of my time recently on this one, so I'm really happy to be here and talk to you guys about it.
Lauren, for the sake of minute taking, would you please give us your full name?
Yeah, Lauren Agabazorgi.
Maybe
I can write it down for you later maybe.
I have you in previous.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Thanks so much.
Hey everybody, and my name is Jordan Lindsay, and I am a recent graduate of the Management and Computer Science faculties. Now I'm an independent student, yeah, and hopefully going to be pursuing graduate studies soon. So we're here to present to you guys about the Burritoville Cooperative Project. I know some of you guys may have heard some stirrings about this over the last semester or two, and we're finally here to break it down for you, give you all of the details, and to ultimately, humbly ask for your support in making this project a reality. So let's jump right into it. So, this is Prezi, by the way. It's going to be jumping around a whole bunch. Okay, so the Cooperative Burritoville is going to be essentially a food systems partner in the food systems here at Concordia. This is currently a student and community-led initiative, and is affiliated with the CFC as one of their working groups. And we are basically going to be purchasing the wonderful restaurant Burritoville, which is right out that window and on Bishop. And we're going to be turning it from a for-profit enterprise into a solidarity cooperative, which is very exciting. So let's start getting into the details. First of all, with any good meal, as in any good project, we need all of the parts of the recipe to make it work. So for this particular meal that we're making, We've got a wonderful restaurant, Burritoville, a ton of phenomenal community. We've got an action plan to bring it all together, and some sensible economics to make it all make sense and be a sustainable enterprise. So, let's first have Lauren talk about Burritoville.
Cool. I'm going to start you guys off with a little history of the restaurant. So in 2004, it actually started as a Nation Burrito in NDG on Sherbrooke West. And this is one of the current co-owners who started working there back in '04. And then a year later, he bought the business, changed the name to Burritoville, continued working there, and in 2007, his two partners joined him, so Steve and Dave, and they remain 3 co-owners today. They wanted to start expanding their business because they realized like the location there was quite small, and they didn't have the capacity to serve actually like the amount of people that were coming in. So they ended up finding this location downtown, which is like an old Victorian style mansion, which is pretty sweet. And so, yeah, and they maintained this business, and this one no longer exists in NDG. But yeah, they've been going strong downtown ever since, serving students. And this year they're going to be celebrating their 10th anniversary and their 6th anniversary at the downtown location. So it's pretty cool.
So, we are basically going to talk about why Burritoville, right? There's quite a few restaurants in the downtown core, and for us to have centered in on this one, there has to be a reason, right? So, we basically were drawn to it for a multitude of reasons. In particular, the business is incredibly well established. So I don't know if you guys know this about businesses, especially startups and restaurants in particular, but they have a very, very short lifespan. Often, very few of them make it to 3 years. This business has been around for 10 in the downtown core. Very, very stable, very resilient to change. They went through 2008. They survived the financial crash, etc. You know, they're doing well. They are one of the first quality organic vegetarian cuisine in the downtown core. They have an excellent online reputation. You guys can check it out on your computers. They got 4 out of 5 on on all of the review sites that we were able to find. Very well received. They're actually they are the highest rated Mexican restaurant in this area, which is very interesting to know. The location and the space are super important. Basically, we are literally on campus. We are, and the way that the space is set up, there's sort of 3 stages to this building, if you guys haven't been in there. So there's like your main floor at the restaurant, and then there's a secondary kind of stage area, and then there's a 3rd library. Now, why this is really important, and we'll get to it once we start talking about our vision, is that there's going to be a lot going on inside of this building. We're going to be having all sorts of different student-related activities going on, and to make it so that these don't interact with each other and conflict with each other, it's important to have a multitude of different spaces. So this is really important for why this Burritoville was chosen. And finally, the history. I'm sure some of you have all interacted with the restaurant. Me personally, I've had many celebratory after final burritos, so it's got a really important place in my heart. So I'm going to pass it on to Lauren to talk about why we need to do this.
Great. Cool, so we're going to probably go into more detail about this like further on in the presentation. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about why this is really, why it's really appropriate for this to be happening now. I mean, obviously there's the need for accessibility to organic, healthy food, vegetarian options on campus. Despite a lot of like the food initiatives that have come up in the past couple of years, I think we still have issues around accessibility to that, so we'd want to maintain that and further develop that. Another big issue, I think, is the need for space for students on campus. I don't think the campus is like satisfying yet for student needs, and this would provide a really good space for students to engage in like a variety of activities that we engage in. Another thing is the experiential learning opportunity, right? So as like being a cooperative model, we'll have a lot of opportunities that we've gotten with the Hive for students to actively engage in collective decision-making, managing a restaurant in a non-hierarchical setting, and the like. And lastly, I think timing is a really big factor right now. The owners are looking to sell, and they've been wanting to sell their business for the past 2 years. The CSU has this fund for student space, so I think it's like a really ripe time for us to be doing this.
So another reason why we're pushing to do this.
Yeah, so actually this is a great example of what I was talking about, like between space and food. A 2012 Leger Marketing survey actually came out with these statistics directly relating to space and food on campus, and it's really interesting because, you know, in the past 3 years, I think the food movement, like the student-led food movement at Concordia has really progressed, but when you think about it, like we're still kind of where we were at this point, because as much as we have projects that are coming up, or like cooperative projects and student-led initiatives around food, we still face the threat of the corporate monopolization of our campus with the major food service provider contracts. So I think the Breedable project is going to be a really big step forward for food sovereignty led by students at Concordia.
Okay, so we're dragging a little bit, I understand. So I'm just going to run through this because I'm sure most of you, having been involved with most of this stuff, know about a lot of the mandates that are currently affecting the CSU in relation to food. We're basically we're hoping to leverage these as well as engage with the food system SPF policy that was recently ratified by you guys to get this funding. Also, a very interesting one of note is that we expect collaboration actually with the university on this project as well, because of their pillar of innovation that is kind of instrumental in their vision of where the university is going to go in the future. So we're going to be tapping into that in the future. And finally, the most important reason why we're doing this is because of our community. This has been a community that I've been a part of for a particularly long time, and it's very important to me, and I know that initiatives like this are going to take it to the next level of where it could possibly be going. So,
So what are the benefits of the community, Jordan?
glad you asked, Lauren. So I'm going to run through these very quickly here, but basically we've got, we're going to be pushing to get the vegetarian, vegan catering option back through the university. We have already started the Living Organization for Research and Projects. Essentially, we have had 2 different student projects that have already come forward, shown interest in getting involved, and have already helped. And we're actually going to bring some of that information into this demonstration or presentation as well. We are going to be pushing the local sourcing that they already do, but actually evaluating this with metrics and making sure and essentially knowing the kilometers that our food travels and trying to diminish this over time, including trying to promote on-campus food production and trying to bring that in to the organization as well. So as well as that, we've got jobs and volunteer networking opportunities. There is guaranteed student space and conference space, so by not being a for-profit anymore, we're going to actually open it up to students to come in without the expectation of having to buy anything. So it will truly become unrestricted student space. Very important thing for us is we are looking at like community innovation. And for this, we are looking to help a lot of student-led cooperatives, not-for-profit initiatives, and ones that don't necessarily have any sort of structure, and help them get involved in the food system and encourage their support of the food system. Finally, there will be sliding scale space rental charges, so we are going to be There's currently a fee charge for rental. We are going to be basing it on the budget that the particular student association or community group has, instead of just charging them kind of like a blanket fee for the space rentals. So, Lauren, come up very nice on the presentation.
No, well, I mean, this can be found at concordiafoodgroups.ca. It's just a draft taken from the website. It was made by a student of Satoshi Ikeda in one of the food politics classes. But anyways, we just wanted to kind of map out the food system as it stands right now, at least the student-run food system, and just point out that Burritoville can play an integral role in this. It wouldn't be like so much as competition, so much as like collaborations and building links amongst each other. So we wanted to talk about how we can collaborate, or we anticipate collaborating with like the Student Cooperative Housing Project, the CSU Daycare, and all these new projects that are coming up, the David O'Brien Center for Sustainable Enterprise, and actually the reopening of Reggie's as well.
For sure. Reggie's is actually a really exciting opportunity for us. We recognize that while Reggie's has been, you know, a really pinnacle point of student fun, let's say, we're noticing that there may be a lot of like cross collaboration between the two groups because they ultimately cater to different clientele, we'll say. You know, you're not going to get like a Senka set from some student association coming to Reggie's because they're going to be engaging with a bunch of other individuals and not really having their private space. So what you might see is like a Senka set that happens in Burritoville, and then afterwards they're like, oh, well, let's go hang out at Reggie's now and, you know, get the night going a little bit more, or vice versa. So there's cross promotions in this way, and it also creates just like a terrace literally of student, it more creates a connection on the terrace for student space on that terrace. Between the two associations, between the two groups.
Another interesting point to note about Reggie's is we have this sort of vision of, I mean, it being a really good player in our food system again, and trying to offer like local beers and local drinks. And you know, there's a student-run cooperative called Les Brasseries Lumineux who hasn't gotten right yet to brewing their own stuff, but I've heard that, you know, the new Reggie's anticipates perhaps like selling that beer, and Burritoville has already formed that relationship with the co-op where they will be providing their space for the brewers to actually make their beer. So not having Burritoville in the picture would actually, you know, put the Brasserie Lumineux project at a standstill for the time being until they were to find a new space.
So let's discuss a little bit about the action plan for making this project a reality. So first of all, let's look at what we've done so far. So about 2 years ago, this conversation started with the owners. Originally, it was a sort of collaborative, open discussion, and then quickly turned into a potential purchase of the building and the space when they recognized that they could, you know, have their baby still live and contribute to the community without their active involvement. So we continued on that conversation for a while, and then about 6 months ago decided to really ramp up that initiative. So we incorporated in December 2nd, 2015 as a solidarity cooperative, and formed our preliminary board of directors in January. During that time, simultaneously, we were getting multiple business evaluations from various different sources. We had an internal one, a market broker, and a outside consultant. Basically, all give us different values, and we agreed tentatively on a maximum value of 150. The organization, the owners are very flexible with this value right now, so we're trying to reach that amount, but if we don't, we're going to find other ways to make the funding happen, further ensuring that this thing goes off without a problem. And then finally, also simultaneously, we've been developing the funding strategy, which is why we're now standing in front of you guys here, asking for your support. You're one of a slew of different bodies that we're going to be speaking to, and you can look through all of those on the CSU proposal because they're all included in that document. yeah, we can move on now to, so now having seen where we came from, Lauren will tell a little bit about where we're going.
Cool. Actually, I think I'm going to do some jumping around on this Prezi business.
That's
So,
good. Yeah.
So the 5 principles we see at the top are kind of values that the CFC likes to adopt in our more broader projects for transforming the food system on campus. And what we see below is is the way that we, like the Burritoville Working Group, wants to apply those same principles with our project. So first, on the ecological side of things, I mean, the restaurant, like we know, it has been established for a long time, and they've already established very well their like sustainable practices in restaurant management. So we just want to maintain that and perhaps further develop that. On the social side of things, I mean, employment opportunities with, I mean, ethical practices. Workers are worker members of the co-op, so they have a lot more, I guess, a lot louder of a voice because it's a horizontal structure. So that's really interesting. Participative governance, volunteer opportunities as well. So that's fun. And finally, we see Burritoville as being an innovation hub. So not just promoting social entrepreneurship, but more of a sort of community entrepreneurship where you have you know, collective projects towards you know, developing a social economy. Again, horizontal structures, non-hierarchical structures that that allow for, you know, participative decision making. So yeah.
So finally, this is our project timeline. As you can see, we have a particularly busy summer ahead of us. There's a lot of information on here, so I'm basically just going to kind of go over it very briefly and not, because I'm sure if you guys have questions about this after, obviously feel free to ask. We can explain the details. Basically, the ones with the numbers are funding milestones, and these are opportunities that we're trying to reach out and connect with these different bodies. We will hopefully have the funding by those particular times. As you can see, we're a little behind. The CSU went by a couple days, not a big deal. So, and all of these ones that don't have numbers to them, a really important part of this is we're going from a for-profit enterprise to a solidarity cooperative, which, as you can imagine, is not only tricky legal, from an actual organizational standpoint, there are a lot of things to overcome, right? You need the workers to be on board with this. You need the directors to understand what the relationship with this board is. If there is any sort of coordination involved, they need to know how they should be coordinating in that space. So during essentially the other points are business development points and transition precautionary measures that we're going to be undertaking to make sure that this goes off smoothly and without any problems. And then finally, we're going to be formally transitioning on the beginning of August, and we will be the Solidarity Cooperative at that point. During that time, we actually have the owner, Jono, who's going to be sticking around with us for a year, because it's very important when you're going through the transition process that you have some sort of institutional memory to carry forward the business, so we don't see any big drops in the organizational success. So now we're going to take a quick look at the economics, the sane economics of this particular project. So first of all, I'd like to mention a few things. Sorry, am I? No, maybe. Okay, cool. So a couple of things are, one, as I mentioned before, Burritoville has been an incredibly stable organization. They've been around for 10 years. That's really unheard of in the restaurant industry. Or, I mean, not unheard of, but it's very uncommon in the restaurant industry. And we are excited to use that as our core on which we're going to be building this thing off of. So we already know we're coming in there with a stable business. They often have some years where they're just like a little bit over break even, some where they're a little under, but they're generally around break even each year. So while we're going to be running the business that way, this isn't a business about making money. This is a business about creating community value and help supporting the food movement at Concordia. And while we're not here to make any, now nobody's going to be making money off this, but if we do make any money from this organization, as any cooperative, we'll be putting this right back into student initiatives and growing this network larger through this. But while the business hasn't made a ton of profit over the last few years, we are very excited about some recent developments that we've learned about through our research about this project. So Lauren, do you maybe want to talk about some of the opportunities?
Yeah, so things that haven't necessarily been tapped into as the business is right now, but that show potential for, you know, if students were managing the restaurant, is that in the future, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the museum is building like a whole new pavilion whose entrance is on Bishop as well. So it's like right on, like the same side as the Burritoville entrance. So it's hopefully going to bring more traffic of the public, more so than students too. So that's really interesting because it will be like a revenue opportunity. And there's also a rumor that the sidewalk on Bishop might be extending itself, or well, not extending itself, but it will be extended. So that will bring more traffic too, and that is really exciting because it'll bring more visibility to the restaurant. Of course, there's going to be like building more relationships with the students at Concordia. I think if students are managing the restaurant, they have more potential to reach out to the student population at Concordia, so hopefully that'll bring in even more students, which we already have at the restaurant, but you know, expanding. And I mean, it has a great bar capacity. It has a full liquor license. It could be open till 3 a.m. if they wanted to, but it isn't right now. So that's a huge potential that's not being, I guess, like utilized to its full potential. So we look forward to doing that.
Yeah, from a cost saving side, there's actually quite a few things that we've noticed in their operations that we can save quite a bit of money on. In particular, the utilities, they pay a obnoxiously large amount for telephone and internet. And we noticed if we cut those costs down immediately, we could look at another $2,000 on our bottom line. From a heating efficiency standpoint, I don't know if you guys know, but old Victoria homes bleed heat like it's going out of style. We've looked at this and we're expecting like a dramatic amount of savings from basically taking some minor investment into the efficiency of the building. So that's huge. That's actually going to be a very huge one. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we've already started this like relationship with some students, getting some in-class projects going. One of them was about the suppliers, basically evaluating our costs of the restaurant, and they found that there are quite a few opportunities to essentially like switch the suppliers slightly to save a ton of money over the course of the year. So these are basically a bunch of opportunities that, while our goal is not to make profit in any way, shape, or form, there might be some opportunity to do that, and it's going to go right back into this community and right back into awesome student initiatives. So here's some other important numbers that really affect the sort of like viability and sustainability of this project. So one, we have a super long lease left with the owners, and we have first right of refusal after the lease is up. The year 2, if you guys look at our business plan, in year 2 we're already projecting a surplus, and that is based on the current operations, not including any of those opportunities that we discussed in the last slide. And then, so that could be even better, who knows. 8 years, yeah, so basically all of the investment that's going to go in, we're projecting that in about 8 to 10 years we're going to be having generated that much money back for the community and again for student initiatives. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the cost?
Yeah, this is just a little summary of our expenses. It's obviously in more detail in the documents that you've been given, and they're also quite conservative estimates, right? So these are like the absolute maximums. They have great potential to be actually cheaper. So we've put the purchase price and fees together. So this is, yeah, the maximum possible purchase price of the business plus like legal fees for actually transitioning the business from a for-profit entity to a solidarity cooperative. Operating capital would include our accounts payable that we'll be inheriting kind of when we when we transition into the business, and just kind of a contingency fund if there's any urgent circumstances that we need to deal with. And then finally the renovations and development. So a lot of the things we just discussed with making the building more energy efficient and taking care of costs with internet and phone bills. This would cost more or less $41,000. So this is the grand total price of our project. But the value to the community, of course, priceless.
So we just want to point out why we're so concerned about this project being a success. And basically we've been looking at what we are going to lose if we don't take over this. I feel like I'm right your way. Okay. But basically, obviously, we're going to lose the awesome restaurant of Burritoville. They are going to sell eventually, and likely, if they don't sell to us, the only people who are going to be able to afford the space are some person who's going to turn it into a McDonald's or a fine dining establishment, which will obviously kill all of the student space potential there, kill all of the pretty much those first 4 lines, and a really big one is that collaboration with the Brasseurs Illuminés, which we are well into at this point, and without the Burritoville building, there will be a lot of strain on that organization, and they may not come back from that particular situation. So that's currently what's going on, and then from these last points, we're basically going to be losing out on all of these cool new projects that are going to be coming in the works. Some of them are stemmed by Brasseurs Illuminés, and some of them we've learned about through conversations with other people. But that's really why this project is super important to us, and we hope that you guys feel the same. I think, yeah, we're back to the main thing here. So that's the end of our presentation. I hope it wasn't too long. And we should have maybe discussed how to do this last part at the end, but I would essentially like to open up the floor to questions from you guys about anything that we've discussed and discuss, or have you guys discuss about things amongst yourselves. Yeah, now it's your turn. We're throwing it back to you guys, people.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was thorough, very interesting. And we'll begin with speakers list, starting with Nick.
2 questions, if I may. The first one will be, who is the landlord? What or who owns the building right now?
So the landlord, I don't know her name, but she is a sweet little old lady who is basically owns a few properties around town, and she's nearing retirement, and so she is, that's her story. She's living off the revenue from these buildings she owns.
Okay. The other reason I ask would be is there a potential to buy after a while if she's retiring? Or is she probably
We have floated the idea around. We're not going to make sort of any commitments or anything in that regard, but she seems interested potentially. But we haven't even discussed that yet.
So, and one last one. Do you know why they've been wanting to sell for a couple of years? The owners of the business, that is.
For sure. So while they've been getting paid themselves, they've been doing this for John has been doing this for 10 years, and the other owners have, you could have taken this one.
8 years. But
Yeah. And basically they are at a point where as I mentioned, they've really not been making much money above and beyond just the general operation and just paying their own wages. So they're excited about exploring new opportunities in their own lives, and are just kind of we've had our 10 years with this thing, it's time to move on to bigger and better things.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, would you keep the same style of restaurant, but I mean a Mexican restaurant? Or do you want to innovate on the menu?
I can cover that. Are you going to go?
Well, you can add to what my answer, but we hope to maintain it for the most part. Add a couple of things, but what's most important, I think, is keeping the values of having organic food as local as possible, and most probably keeping it a vegetarian menu, because it also like if we start to serve non-vegetarian meals, it changes the operations of the restaurant a lot. And so we want to stay within that sort of framework, keep it Mexican influenced, but like potentially add some items to the menu.
And the type of food is particularly cost effective from an organic standpoint. Obviously organic food is slightly more expensive in the market right now, so by having things like beans and chickpeas and these things that are more of like a bulk food, it saves it allows us to have more flexibility with the cost of the price that is charged kind of like long term. So we want to have that flexibility, and for the most part we've only had minimal discussion about menu changes. So as we're going forward, we kind of just want the business to stay as it is because we know it's successfully operating that way, and we don't want to disrupt it too much in the beginning. Minor changes over time to explore those kind of ideas.
Floor is open. Okay, John and Ben.
Like you said that Reggie's and Burritoville would be like working together cooperatively, but essentially like Reggie's will be a prime competitor because like there's going to be a pub food there now, and I just like wanted to know if that was taken into consideration in many of the ways, because like they will be like competing with each other, especially regarding like now that there's going to be food at locations, and like the promotion of alcohol is like a big thing for Burritoville now. So just like what your ways like to distinguish like maybe Burritoville in a lot of ways you're saying stuff, but
yeah. Okay, so I had a good thought about that and I just lost it. So there's a kind of like a few aspects to this. Sorry, do you want to rephrase your question one more time?
just basically you when you highlighted Reggie's, you just talked about how they could like work together by catering to different clientele, and then I guess I was looking for like a more elaborate idea on that, because like they will actually be in direct competition with each other,
sure.
Like extremely.
For sure. Okay, so first of all, Burritoville as an organization will have a ton of competition. Like, I'll be honest with you, like the whole downtown core is on competition, right? And interestingly, Burritoville and Reggie's have actually coexisted for several years before this time with food. Reggie's had food on several occasions, and this didn't really affect either of their operations. We are more excited about working on, I guess, the differences and the compatibilities of the two organizations, right? So like we can stay open till 3, Reggie's can only stay open till 2, you know, and like these like subtle things. We have like cordoned off spaces that are very good for like small gatherings of people, as I said, like 5 sets or like small events where people want to do like a gallery showcase or something like this. You can't really do that in Reggie's. So we're recognizing that there's a ton of demand with the students, and we're recognizing that we can tap into a different demand than what Reggie's is tapping into. And on top of that, we'd really like to find ways to work together, like through Brasseur Illuminé and through potentially food options. I don't know if you guys are doing burritos or not, but I think that there's a lot more. If we approach the relationship in a collaborative fashion, we'll find a lot of opportunities to work together instead of worrying about the minor losses that might come from cannibalization is the term. Yeah.
Okay, Ben?
I'm going to move to approve the funding, contingent obviously on the successful purchase of the business, so the money is not just going to be transferred to the organization, but rather if the transaction or if the sale of the business will successfully go through. Obviously, the motion is to approve the funding. I just want to say that obviously it's contingent on the sale going through and not just the transfer. Can I move it after a second?
Yeah, well, that's the motion. Did everyone hear it clearly? Yeah. Okay, so seconded, Delica. Go ahead and move it.
Okay, so just for full disclosure, I was kind of around in the inception of this project, so I guess that could be like a declaration of a potential conflict of interest, but I think that actually gives me pretty good insight into where the project is and whether or not it's viable. Because I've kind of seen it from start to finish. So basically the way that, and this is kind of lengthy, sorry, I've been taking a few notes, I just want to explain why, because giving $100,000 to an organization is obviously a large amount of money, I obviously don't want the CSU or myself to be promoting a project that won't be successful, so I have a long kind of explanation as to why I think that this is a good investment for us to be making. So essentially what we're doing is if we were to approve of this funding, is we're investing in the continuity of the mission of the Brunoville, which I think is something that we've been historically doing anyways in the past. We have very clear mandates from students that say that they want these sorts of things to continue. They've left us with really great foundations to build off of. We actually passed a policy that's specifically about this kind of a food business recently this year. I wrote the policy. I mean, a project like this has kind of a few key areas that need to be there for it to be successful. So if we look at the promoters, the people that are pushing this project, basically that are pursuing it, we have somebody who has, or we have obvious backgrounds in business from students from the business side of things. We have people that have backgrounds in community economic development. We have, as you can see in the business plan, there's somebody, actually Lauren, do you currently work there? You used to work there. She currently works there. She's been working there for a while. So the promoter, one of the promoters actually has inside information. And she's also the Concordia Food Coalition coordinator, which means that she's directly connected to a group that works on pushing these things in the university and building a culture of support for these sorts of activities. And yeah, so, and then on the financial side, I know the way that the finances are for the business, and they're definitely on an upward trend. The space is going to add to student space in a pretty big way. Like I've actually gone through and done a tour of the entire space. There's a lot of potential there, a lot of potential. The membership will be open obviously, so our members will be able to become members of that, the co-op as well. And the money that it makes stays in the co-op, so it's not like we're not just giving $100,000 to an organization that can then just capitalize on an individual level off of that money. I guess back to finances too. I think it's really promising that during the transition period of the year, we have the owner who wants to stick around to make sure that it's going to be a stable transition. When I met with them earlier to discuss this, I've met with the group numerous times actually to discuss this. I was actually impressed with their kind of level of knowledge of how it could be destabilized during a transition period like this. But with people who are involved in the project, I've been around for a while, and with one of the owners who have been there basically since the beginning. Anyways, that's a very promising sign. The staff retention too at Brutoville, which wasn't really touched on in the presentation, I don't think it was, is actually really good. We have people that have been around for many years that stick around. This is a really good sign for the business as well. The management style is already pretty close to acting like a collective. Obviously there are hierarchies inside, but that means that there's not going to be a huge shift away from the current culture. So it's not going to be disrupted massively because of a shift in the culture. There will probably be, there'll be some disruptions, but it will be minimized, I think. Let's see. I mean, on our side of things, like we've organized like conferences about food sovereignty and things like this in the past, and we've seen a huge amount of support and involvement and excitement from students with this room being like over capacity with people at the conference 2 years in a row. And I think that their business model will inspire increasing loyalty to the organization rather than less. And it's already a very strong organization in terms of loyalty. Like people that go there, there's a certain sense of loyalty, and I think it will only expand with the community roots that it's trying to develop even further. And on the point of competition, I actually think that by having it student run, it actually reduces the competition, because like it was said earlier, there's competition everywhere. It's already been around, so it's already in competition with all the other organizations, but the fact that it's student run means that we have a direct input, or can have a direct input into how it operates, which means that there's actually a lot of potential for collaboration rather than competition, which actually changes the dynamic entirely, I think. So I think that it's the opposite of competition, actually. I can see how it can be competition, but also on that note, the people that they're using for consultants to make the business plan are actually the people that are writing our business plan for Reggie's as well, so they know intimately the details of the business, and so I don't think that they're going to be writing, and of course we're not going to be asking them to write a business plan that will be competing with it, but all this is to say that it's a valid point, but I think that we can have that covered pretty well. Obviously it's a risk, as anything like this would be a risk, but I think it's a pretty good risk to take, and I think it's pretty minimal. So yeah, I could go on for a while. Yeah, and yeah, if we don't do this, the brewer, or not, anyways, if we don't do this, if there isn't like a transfer of this sort of ownership, then the Brewers Co-op won't have a place to brew because they're not legally allowed to brew on campus. And so this is the only place where the co-op is actually able to around to brew near the school. So, I mean, these are kind of my haphazard notes that I took right now. But all in all, it seems pretty promising. The general manager has looked over, our general manager has looked over it as well. And he thinks that it's a positive project as well. That it can be successful. So on our side of things, I think that we've done our due diligence on the executive side, and it seems like it's a good investment for us to make. Yeah, and I think that we're well positioned to specifically make these kinds of investments that otherwise these kinds of projects wouldn't really have the opportunity to exist because there's not necessarily other bastions of community capital. So yeah, so I'm in full support of the project. So yeah, thanks for the presentation.
All right, thank you for that. So this starts a new speakers list. I've got a few people, starting with Jason.
I really like the presentation. I believe this is a great idea. I look forward to seeing this come to fruition. That being said, I just had a question regarding how much is left in the Silk Fund for this project?
Ben, or Heather, do you care to respond?
Roughly.
Let's say roughly 9 mil.
Okay, cool.
So, you know.
Okay, John, I had you next.
Yeah, just to further say what Ben was saying for Csu Meeting April, it's actually illegal in Quebec to brew beer on campus. And so having an initiative like this, which is essentially on campus, but is a not on campus entity, it's the perfect type of partnership. And so that's super key for the project as it continues to evolve. And also Burritoville is awesome. Their food's great, and my MA organization, Csu, always has events there, and they're always super great. And so if the organization continues to exist as it already does, and then the CSU just gets to interject more community building and student life and awesome things into it, I can only see it flourishing more. So yeah, it sounds awesome.
Great. Emily.
First of all, thanks for the presentation. I really like a lot of the ideas you were putting forward. I just have a question that specifically has to do with the brewing. I don't know if you can answer this because it has more to do with with the other co-op. But I mean, who's going to be taking care of that paperwork? Because I know just to produce alcohol for sale is expensive and a very, very sticky, tricky business.
For sure. So they already have a sales license.
They have a sales license?
I believe.
Okay.
No, they don't. He's probably.
They totally don't.
Okay, they don't. They don't.
Okay, just because
this is a rumor that had been brought up before.
Just you can get busted with all kinds of food, health, safety regulations, but brewing especially is very dangerous to keep business. Let's say something was to happen. I mean, you're dealing with a business, not a business, but a cooperative that's not even off the ground. How would Burritoville be reliable in one sense if something was to flop?
Okay, I can answer this. Do you want to answer it first?
I'll answer it after.
Okay. So, so this is one part of what we're doing with this organization is we're actually trying to turn it into an innovation hub. So this is exactly a perfect example of the type of work that we would be doing, either through our volunteer capacity or through the board of directors ourselves, who are very interested in this type of stuff. We would go in and work with them to make sure that those things are first feasible and then executed properly. We have connections with a ton of CDR and these other community cooperative development organizations around the city. So we could tap into those relationships as well to help bring information into that situation. I don't know the process exactly, so I can't really comment on that too much. But that's what we're hoping to do with this organization is exactly that type of work.
But likely, Csu Meeting would be the ones in charge of renewing and paying for the brewing.
For sure.
Okay. Burritoville would not be affiliated with that whatsoever.
I think the only concern that we might have is that if Les Brasseries Humaines doesn't have an actual address, we might have to provide them with the same address. So they might be registered as 2055 Bishop sort of thing with location. That might be a concern with legitimizing their operations, but I think otherwise they're their own entity and they're registered as a cooperative. So
cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Marcus, I had you next.
I was just wondering if I believe I read or heard of this in some fashion that Breedaville or Co-op Breedaville will attempt to get on the official list of caterers for Concordia. Is that going to be the case?
We're going to work towards that, yeah. We used to be on it, or not we, but the organization used to be on it, but then the university basically had some more strict criteria that they didn't have the energy or capacity to keep working on. So now with sort of like a more extended and larger group of individuals working on these problems, especially being so connected with the university, we're going to try and jump right back in there and then offer vegan and vegetarian options for catering here on campus.
Terry, did you raise your black card?
Yes.
Okay, you're up.
Okay, I would like to speak in favor of helping these folks get off the ground, so to speak, but I have a question first. Do you know what the square footage is of the building that you're potentially looking to see?
I don't know it off the top of my head. It's page.
It's in the business plan. I can't quite remember it either right now, but it is there.
Just from privileged information that I may know, it's probably in the several thousands of square feet. So just to think about it in a way where we are spending, or we're being asked to spend around $100,000 to then create an autonomous organization that's going to run like several thousand feet of student space. I think that's pretty fucking cool. And just to think about the way that they've been approaching this with their presentation, like they've talked about expanding their client base to like the people who are going to be in the museum with the new entrance space, and additionally the way that this business has to operate is they are not dependent on student clientele for a third of the year, effectively, through the summer months. So I just think that this inherently builds in an element that removes like a dependency on students for their business, like besides the like cooperation or the competition side of it. I just think that the fact that they've been operating for like X number of years with that to keep into account shows their ability to like harness the market that's not student oriented here. And I see that there to be a lot of potential for, I guess, more smaller scale student events to take place, but I think without a doubt, like when it comes to revenue generating events, like in a big sense, they're going to be happening at Reggie's. Just if you think about the acoustics of the space at Reggie's, I'm sure audio wise there's going to be a lot more investment placed into Reggie's as opposed to at Burritoville, so it's not going to be like the place, unfortunately, for like big audio events, but that's not necessarily what Burritoville's seeking. So I think that there's a lot of differences there inherently. And yeah, I just think that considering, just to put into perspective, we put, and I'm still standing very firmly with this, but we put over the amount of what's being asked for into relocating the advocacy center. And the advocacy center in a square footage perspective is a lot smaller. So like several thousands of square feet smaller. So I just think that kind of like, you know, economic factor should be taken into account when we're making this decision.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jeremy, I had you next. Okay. That does it for the speakers list. Unless anyone has anything to add. Okay. Conversation is exhausted. We're going to proceed to a vote. Not that.
I just wanted to quickly amend the motion to say that it would be expensed out of the SILC fund. That could be, I'm sure that that's what everybody's understanding anyways, it's just, it wasn't specifically in the motion, so just for the purposes of the fund committee.
Yeah, sure, that's going to be explicit like that. So there is a motion to amend the amendment, seconded by Terry. Is that a friendly amendment? Does that need require any discussion that the money be taken from the SILC fund? Okay, then that can be a friendly amendment.
Can I ask that you read the motion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, I think this is going to get fine-tuned after anyway, but
It's just the motion to approve the funding contingent on the successful purchase of the business to be expensed from the SILC fund, is all that's been said.
Everyone got a chance to hear that? Okay. Well, with the discussion exhausted, that takes us to a vote then. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. too high so we can count. Those opposed? Those opposed, John? And abstentions? Okay, well, that carries. So thank you again for the presentation. But before moving on to the next agenda point, does anyone have anything they'd like to add? Any further questions? If not, then, yeah, sure.
Thanks for giving us so much time. Thanks for listening and stuff.
Yeah, taking time out of your schedule.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for keeping Burritoville in the community.
Awesome. Great, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that point exhausted, this takes us over, well, is about to take us to point E in new business substantive, but before that I've gotten some requests for excusals. By email I've gotten 2 requests for excusals which I have to address right away. The first is from Tamer, who writes, "Hey Matt, I will not be able to attend the meeting tonight. I'm assisting a close friend of mine and her family with funeral preparations for her grandmother, which is tomorrow morning. I thought I would be done by now, but I have not, and obviously will not be leaving until we are done. I hope the council will excuse my absence." So that's the first request for excusal from Tamer. The second is from Scott, who writes, "Dear council, I am not able to attend today's meeting. I am not feeling well, and as such, am unable to attend the meeting. Sincerely, Scott." So if anyone wants those to be reread, or if anyone has any discussion at the time, okay? Jenna? Okay, motion to excuse Tamer. Second, Terry? Yeah, Jenna, read it. Pardon me?
Can you read Scott's?
Oh, sorry. Sure, Scott said, "Dear council, I am not able to attend today's meeting. I am not feeling well, and as such, am unable to attend the meeting." So we're currently on a speakers list to excuse Tamer. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we can proceed to Fatty.
It's not exactly about that point, but I would like to be excused as well.
Oh, okay, we'll get to that in a moment. If there's no discussion for Tamer, we can proceed to a vote then. All those in favor of excusing Tamer's absence for the duration of the meeting? Okay, those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. Yeah, so Fatty, you were saying?
Yes, I would like to be excused, please.
Now, is this in pertaining to the fact that you have to leave now?
Well, not specifically now, but I mean, like just before we go on into like another point.
Okay.
Because I felt like there's like a break in the meeting, so I was like, this is the perfect time to.
Okay, I'm just going to try and get some clarity. Are you saying that you're afraid that the meeting is going to go on
Yes.
past 90
Yeah,
minutes?
exactly.
Oh, okay, and you'd like to be excused right
Yeah.
now? Okay, well, I mean, this is up to council to decide. It can also be possible that the meeting will be shorter than 90 minutes, in which case it could be done retroactively. Would you like to have a motion before right now? Would you like to consider next meeting?
Just let me check one last time the agenda. So you have the small lounge, the sexual harassment, UCAM 9, and AGM left.
Yeah, that's correct.
No, I'd like to do it now.
Okay. So Fatty's putting forth a motion to request for his excusal for the duration of this meeting. Yeah, seconded Terry. Is there any discussion about this? Yeah, Marcus?
Why are you gonna leave?
Well, I have, like, I don't know, like Matt said, I don't know how long the meeting will still go on, and have quite a few assignments for tomorrow morning.
Angelica?
Well, the thing is, I don't know how much time more the meeting will take, and I have quite a few assignments for tomorrow morning, so just to be on the safe side.
Okay, if that exhausts the discussion, we can proceed to a vote then. Those in favor of excusing Fatty, please raise your placards. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, sorry, that is. So we're now still on the ad hoc point of excusals, because this is open. Okay. If no one has anything further to add for excusals, leaving, of course, Scott's request for excusal open, then we can proceed to the next agenda point. Okay, so the next agenda point then is the proposal for a small 7th floor lounge theater space. I'm not sure who's speaking to this point, however.
I'm speaking to it.
Okay.
Essentially, I'm more curious to hear from people how they feel about it. This is a proposition that's coming from our office manager. She's said that this has been something that she's wanted to do for a long time, but she didn't think that there was funding for it anywhere, to which I said, there is funding for improvements to student space, and that got her really excited. So then she started to put this proposal together. As it says in the proposal, we don't really have a lot of the specifics that we need right now because we have to work with the university for something like this, and that particular department is not interested in kind of indulging in our fancies unless we, as like an organization, unless we kind of have shown some level of commitment to it in terms of like, basically they're afraid that we're going to get them to do a bunch of work, which they do a lot of work for us on these projects, and then just kind of walk away from it maybe a bit later after they've expensed a bunch of things. So I think it's pretty fair for them to say that. They're not saying that to us on the larger projects. They're actually extremely helpful for the larger projects. So, but on something like this, anyways, we're not like working with the VPs of the university on this thing. We're working with like the lower departments. So we don't have all of the full information. And actually today I was given more information that one of our estimates, which we thought would be around 1,200, is actually closer to 5,000. So in my opinion, this is not a game changer really. Something like this would increase the use of the space pretty substantially. Like I could imagine people, like we have people that basically come in, set up shop on tiny little TVs and play video games for a while. I think that's a really great use of the space for people to take a break during school and things like this. And this way they could maybe do that with a huge screen instead of a small one, or they could set up tournaments, and we do have video game tournaments here. People could watch sports games. If people aren't to the Olympics when that's playing, that could be shown on there. It could just be a little theater, essentially, for movie nights or whatever. It's a really extremely versatile addition to the space, I think, and it would be across the board usable for people. But the thing is that I think it's a bit premature anyways for us to be approving this because we learned basically today that there will be like that $5,000 instead of $1,200. There might be a few other areas where the price will be higher than we anticipated. But I mean, ultimately, I think that my opinion will be pretty unchanged unless it just becomes like this egregious expense, which I don't see that happening. But it's too early to approve anything right now because we don't really have the numbers. But I'm curious to hear feedback from people. Is this something that people are interested in us continuing to pursue? Maybe that in and of itself, the fact that it's discussed here, and if there's not like heavy opposition or anything like that, would be enough to tell the university to move forward on this because it seems like something we might be interested in. But anyways, there's no formal motion or anything like that. But yeah, the document was also sent out really recently, so I apologize for that because, as I said in the post, it wasn't. It didn't have that part about the university, or anyways, it wasn't a complete report, so a portion was added recently, so I think that just now. But yeah, so questions, great.
There's Jason and Jeremy.
Seeing proposals like this, that makes me very happy to be a member of the Concordia University community, and it's very well prepared, and I find the idea excellent. To make any good use of such wasted space, I'm super receptive, and to be honest, 15,000 with taxes, and if it were to increase to far more than that, let's say 20, I find it still doesn't outweigh the benefit to our community. And this is a great idea, and I hope to see this come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
So is this going to be managed by the CSU?
Yeah. Floor is open. Right.
I already asked you the questions, and I didn't have a clear answer. Like, there's the MSA that gives the 7th floor small lounge and big lounge every Friday, and I just wanted to know if this might affect their event on Fridays at noon in any way.
On a structural level, I don't see that it would, because it's the kind of thing where you could tuck away the curtains. The projector will be like essentially in the roof. It's not going to like those little doorway / whatever those things are, like the turning pillars, like they're still going to be there. So I don't see it affecting it on a structural level. It might increase the competition for the space, but I mean, that's just the reality of it. But I mean, I don't see it having a direct impact on that. I mean, the use of that space in like perpetuity is always up to whoever's here.
So just to reiterate, there's no motion proposed here, just some Q&A. Floor is open. All right. Heather, then Terry.
Sorry, I just want to add further to that, Rami, that the MSA often like books their spaces at the beginning of the year. So like, just say, yeah, there'll be more competition for the space, but as MSA are usually very organized, hopefully that won't impact them either, because they book all their Friday events at the beginning of the year.
Terry.
I was just wondering what's the timeline between once the proposal returns to council and if finances are approved and the ability for students to start playing video games on really big screens.
Honestly, I don't know. I imagine 4 months is like a safe number, just to, but you know, you never know. I imagine 4 months.
Marcus.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was taken under consideration to get better seating and everything for that area, same kind of seating we had on the rest of the 7th floor with the comfy couch kind of thing and not the crappy plastic chairs. You know, something to take into consideration, maybe. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was a question or not.
It was a general question.
All right.
Interesting concept.
Would you care to respond, Ben?
Yeah, we talked about this. Basically, the understanding was that we'd probably just move the chairs that are already on the floor if people wanted to use the space. But if it becomes an issue in the future, the Silk Fund is available for these sorts of purchases, more or less. Definitively, the fund committee has agreed that furniture is a necessary component of space use. So, yeah.
Sweet. Jeremy?
Might I just more comment on that? I understand that the CSU is going to be managing the space and letting people use it, but like with a lot of the other spaces that they've mentioned, there are technicians that are overseeing the equipment, and is somebody at the CSU going to be doing that? Because that's a lot of work as well. Like if they plan on getting like, depending on what type of systems they get, like it could be complicated, and depending on when they're booking them, somebody from the CSU is going to have to be there to help them out occasionally, I would assume. And so that's something to consider as well, because it could actually be an extra cost, operational wise as well.
Would a motion be in order to authorize the executive board to, up to a certain amount, execute this proposal without coming back to council when the final number comes in? Would that be possible?
As far as putting forth a motion to mandate the executive?
To permit them at their own discretion up to a certain limit of money, should we choose, perceive an expansion in the costs, authorize them to carry out the project and approve it without coming back to us.
I think that might be contingent on the amount.
Up to a maximum, that's why we would provide a maximum should it inflate. Would that be in order? And would the executives be open to that?
Well, I believe that it would be in order, but you might want to see what the executives have to say about it. Care to speak to that?
At this point, I'm just not sure how much it's going to cost. So, I mean, it could be in order. I mean, we could do it. Heather, do you want to take it?
I was just going to say that I don't really think that it's necessary. Like, there's no sense of urgency on this project, and considering it's such a well-used student space, I think it's a good idea for it to come back to council so that all council members are aware of like the exact stipulations of the space. But thanks for your vote of confidence anyway.
Okay, Terry.
Perhaps in the spirit of what Jason was bringing up, we can have a motion to express our support for the project and are aware of, express support for the project, being aware of the financial ramifications as a way to indicate to the university that we've discussed it at a board level, we're aware of what the financial costs are, however they haven't been defined fully, and maybe that will allow the university to entertain our ideas of moving ahead with this.
Okay, well that would be perfectly in order. Is that something you're proposing, or is that something?
I would have liked to do that, but
I misunderstood.
Do it.
Okay.
All right, well, actually, I had Jason come next.
Sorry, I misunderstood what the core point was. I didn't catch on to everything.
Oh, okay. Well, I move to have the board take a position in support of the with the 7th floor lounge theater space project, with the understanding of the numbers that were presented in the document today, and that we would like to see this project move forward conceptually.
Okay. So seconded by Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to amend it a little bit.
Oh, okay, so that's the seconding and an amendment, or a request for amendment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, that instead of the numbers in the document, for it to say that with the understanding that, that it will be more expensive than we at first anticipated on the issue, because the university we're in communication with them, so they know. What's the, if I get the specific wording, because I don't know how that's going to be written down, and then I can make a better amendment, I think.
Okay.
I just wrote down what Terry said, which is moves to have the board take a position in support with the 7th floor lounge theater space project with the understanding of the numbers that were presented in the document today, and to see the project move forward conceptually.
Does that clarify? Thanks, David.
Okay, I would move to amend to say understanding that the numbers in the document will actually be significantly inflated if the project is to come to fruition.
Okay, so there's a motion to amend to include that statement. Is there a seconder to the amendment? Okay, Terry, either of you, Terry? Is there a, oh, okay, there's discussion on the amendment? Oh, sorry. No, okay. If there's no discussion on the amendment, could we consider it friendly? Okay, that's fine, so that'll be included in the main motion. Return to the speakers list for the main motion, which is currently open. Jason?
At the beginning of this conversation, Ben, you'd said that the university wants to see a commitment on our part for them to move forward. Does this satisfy that, or do they need something more strongly worded? This was the reason why I proposed the wording of my motion initially, is to satisfy that requirement on behalf of the university. Is this enough of a commitment?
Yeah, honestly, I think this is more than enough, because I would just communicate. I don't even really foresee us sending them the actual motion, so much as us saying, yeah, we spoke about it as a council and as a board, specifically like the funding body of the organization, and there seems to be, what I can see, basically unanimous support for it. So I think it's great. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so then I would speak for the motion. Cool.
Thank you. Heather, did you black or no?
Nope.
Okay, Jeremy, you're up.
I'm for this project as well. I just think logistically, because they're talking about in the proposal just having it as blinds. Like, is this going to be a closed off area with walls? Because if you think about it, like if these two spaces are going to be separate spaces, they could be double booked. And I remember just last year when we sometimes had a council meeting in that space, there was occasionally that person snoring, and he was loud. And so if other people are having an AGM in that large space, and then a whole bunch of people are now playing video games very loudly, there's gonna be a conflict there. And so I think the budget here is unrealistic, because I think the space actually has to be closed off with walls. Because there is going to be that noise aspect to this.
Logistical concern. Does anyone care to respond to that?
I think this is something that we're factoring into the discussions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because of soap. Okay, that exhausts conversation. We can proceed to a motion, and this is just to reiterate is a motion of support for the 7th floor lounge theater space project. So those in favor of the support motion, please raise your placards. Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that carries. Anything further before we move to the next point? Okay, great. So that takes us to point F on new business, sexual harassment, safe campus, and student associations. Heather, are you speaking to this point?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the motion is quite long, so maybe I'll just say what it's about. I'm sure everybody in this room knows.
Well, I mean, if you begin with the motion and then there's a seconder, you can elaborate on it.
Okay, sure. Okay. Okay. Whereas recent developments have brought to light incidents of misogynistic, sexist, racist, and general discriminatory behavior by 2 male executives at the Arts and Science Federation of Associations. Whereas the individual who was repeatedly targeted by various forms of harassment sought assistance from the university's Dean of Students office and subsequently the Office of Rights and Responsibilities at Concordia University and was refused support and help. Whereas there is currently a complaint being filed on behalf of the targeted individual by the Center for Research Action on Race Relations with the Human Rights Commission. Be it resolved that the CSU take a position in support of the student targeted and known in the Gazette article as Mei Ling, bracketed not her real name, in her efforts to address the issues of racism, sexism, misogyny, and general discrimination within the Arts and Science Federation of Associations and the 2 men accused as part of the incident. Be it further resolved that the CSU deplore the inaction of the Dean of Students Office and the Office of Rights and Responsibilities following their cognizance of persistent racist, sexist, misogynistic, and general discriminatory behavior occurring within the Concordia community. Be it further resolved that the CSU denounce the selective communication of the Office of Rights and Responsibilities with Mei Ling as to her rights and responsibilities effectively preventing restorative justice from being pursued through internal mechanisms within Concordia. Be it further resolved that the CSU calls on the university to begin an open investigation into how the negligent oversight resulted between the Office of Rights and Responsibilities, the Dean of Students Office, and Mei Ling in regards to the process by which her case was mishandled. Be it further resolved that the CSU denounce the lack of any specific policy on sexual harassment and sexual assault in the Code of Rights and Responsibilities, and the lack of survivor-oriented support by the Office of Rights and Responsibilities. Be it further resolved the CSU support CRAR's call for mandatory sensitivity training on race, gender, and other civil rights issues for all ASFA executives for the next 2 years, including the 2 men accused, and the creation of an independent task force to develop concrete ways to combat and prevent racism, sexism, and sexual violence in its activities. Be it further resolved that the CSU adopt the implementation of mandatory and accessible consent and sensitivity training on race, gender, and other civil rights issues for all students in representative positions, appointed or elected, and encourage other student associations on campus, as well as the university's administration, to institutionalize similar processes for individuals in positions of leadership. Be it further resolved, the CSU Policy Committee explore and implement a code of conduct on sexual assault and harassment, which is to be presented to council in the near future. Be it further resolved, the CSU adopt a position in support of formally including the Center for Gender Advocacy in any university committee, working group, task force, or other deliberative body that reviews or engages with topics of sexual assault, sexual harassment, gender-based harassment, or violence, present and future.
Thank you very much for reading that motion, which is very lengthy, but also I think very important. Is there a seconder to it? Okay, great. So Heather, would you care to motivate?
Sure. I'll also post it on the council.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you already posted it? Yeah. Okay, so it's posted there, and I'm just gonna add the second last one. That's fine. The second last be it further resolved.
Well, in the meantime, Jason, did I see your placard go up for the speakers list?
Yeah, I was to request that the motion be put on Facebook, and now I'm glad it's here. Nonetheless, this is a very big resolution. I would have loved to have enjoyed a bit more time to look it over and propose more well thought out amendments. So the only comment I have is that I really enjoy the mindset behind this resolution. I fully support it. It's just something very technical issues. For example, misogyny is hatred towards women. Could we include, in regardless of gender, regardless of gender, any specific hatred based on someone's sex instead. I feel like sexism covers that pretty well. But that's simply a comment I have. Other than that, I'm going to try and read through this, see if I any other comments. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Lucy?
I actually have, I guess, like 2 comments. I do want to just maybe defend misogyny as a term, because, I mean, yeah, sexism is florable either way, but when you're looking at sexism, like it's against women. Right now we're discussing toxic culture against women and feminized people and feminized bodies and feminized politicians. So in this particular case, it would be a dilution to take it away from the issue, which is entrenched misogyny. And I also wanted to, I really like the Be It Further Resolved, where it talks, it just bringing in the Office of Rights and Responsibilities, because, actually, you know, I'll actually rescind. Someone else can maybe bring that up if they want to, but I think it is important to consider that some things get charged under the Office of Rights and Responsibilities and some things don't, and it often depends on what embarrasses the university the most. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Floor is open. Okay. So there's no further discussion? Ben?
Could we have a little more time? If no one objects, could we have a little more time?
Is that, if I get the feel of the room, the pulse of the room, would you care for a few more minutes to just go over the motion and various be resolved?
Yes.
Okay. Heather?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to respond to you, Jason, about that comment. Also, like, we were, the quickness of why this thing was put together so fast and not really given to counselors is, I mean, the article came out like a week ago, and then we got in touch with the Center for Gender Advocacy and sort of wrote this in collaboration with them, considering we sort of look to them as the expert resource on campus for these issues. They, yeah, were okay, even enthused about all the terms that were utilized in this motion. So hopefully that appeases your concern.
Might just find out. Jason?
Never mind. I rescind. No, actually, well, thank you, and I totally agree. The comments made before reminded that there is a strong culture that needs to be addressed. So I will retract my previous statement saying we should remove it. I think it's okay. And I was about to say, how can we, how would we reinforce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th resolution paragraph regarding to having ASFA executives go through sensitivity training on race, gender, and other civil rights. Another word, call for, makes it doesn't, not explicitly ordering. How would we? Sorry, I'm trying to find the right words here. What strategies would we use to approach this and have them do this?
Okay, so a question about enforcement.
Yeah, how would we enforce this?
Okay.
Instead of just a call for.
Does anyone feel comfortable speaking to that? Terry's got your placards left?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, please.
Okay. So it directly links that, like that section directly links to what CRAR's doing. So it's more supporting the actions or what's being pursued by CRAR. The actions that the CSU may foreseeably take are written in separate sections. So I don't think that what we're trying to do is kind of manifest the demands or calls made by CRAR, but all we are articulating is our support for the perspective CRAR is employing in trying to reduce this like rape culture that we're seeing on campus.
Okay, thank you. Marian, I think I saw your placard go up.
I was just wondering if someone could remind me if we already had a position about this, but the residence consent trainings that the Center for Gender Advocacy has been proposing multiple times to do in collaboration with the university, and I don't remember if we'd supported that in the past or if we could maybe include it in this motion to say that we, because they just did an open letter actually, reiterating their offer to do consent trainings for all students and residents, and maybe this is a place where we could also iterate support for that initiative.
Can I speak to that?
I move to amend the motion to add a be it further resolved that the CSU reiterates its support for the Center's for Gender Advocacy's call for mandatory consent workshops at their residences.
Okay. Matthew's to second? All right.
Can I motivate quickly?
Sure.
I'm pretty sure we already have a position, yeah, but I think reiterating is, I think, a good idea. Personally, obviously it's subject to everybody here, but yeah, I think that we do, and still good to do it.
Is there any discussion on that amendment to the motion? Okay, so that can be considered friendly, and we can return to the speakers list, the main motion, which is open. Yep, thank you.
I have something of a question and a point of information. It says in the second whereas, the individual was repeatedly targeted by various forms of harassment. The only one that I read about was the message in question, the Facebook message. What others have I missed? And is there any proof of them? I'm just curious. Yes.
Yeah, there was quite a few articles, starting with the Gazette, I believe, and also in the Link and the Concordia, and it goes over briefly that this was more so just like direct evidence that the student in question acquired, and that this sort of behavior was going on throughout the entire year, and was also replicated with a couple other people in ASPA and other organizations.
Is the article right? Can I read it?
Yeah.
Ben, just a second, Heather, did you want to add to that?
I just wanted to add that, like, some of, like Ben was saying, some of the information that was gathered regarding this motion are from, like, people that have been involved with it more intimately, the person themselves and CRAR, the representatives from CRAR. Yeah, and I guess lastly, I mean, the explicit, horrific quotes that were involved in the Gazette article, I suppose people point to, like, that being sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of what this person dealt with for harassment issues throughout their mandate. So that's all.
Okay, thanks. Ben?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the CSU itself, as an organization, is not exempt from these sorts of issues either. In the past, I've been around for many years, and I've heard of things that are not exactly very fun to talk about. And so I think that this is an important opportunity for us to take a step in the right direction. But also, I think it's important to just acknowledge the CSU's potential role in these kinds of issues, and just very firmly put ourselves on the side of taking action to change the culture positively.
Thank you, Jason. All right.
And participate in the conversation and sensitivity training. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jason. The floor is open. Okay, does council feel like it's had enough time to review the motion? If there's no objections, then we can proceed to a vote. And I agree, right? I'm just kidding. It is available to consult on the Facebook group, though. In the meantime, we can proceed to a vote, since there are no objections. So those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. Those opposed? And abstentions? Thank you very much, that passes. Is there any further discussion on this point before we move on?
I just want to say that that there was a resolution about the policy committee looking into developing a code of conduct for the CSU and also implementing mandatory training. And so hopefully that is going to come up next council meeting, just to let people know about that. Future plans.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we can move on to point G of new business, UCAM 9 expulsions.
Okay, so I will, before reading the motion, if it's okay, just talk about the obvious factor that it's not ideal to receive motions in this manner at the last moment. But the thing with these motions are that we are essentially in real time, and we're responding in real time to very fast changing environments. And obviously, large bureaucracies are not the best forms, or not the best at addressing these kinds of issues, but at the same time, I think it's important that we take positions. So I'll just begin with I guess that was a bit of a, anyways. I'll just read the motion, it's quite long, bear with me, and thank you for your patience. Whereas political targeting is taking place at UQAM against student leaders upholding mandates given to them through their memberships, whereas the Education Minister, François Blais, has already called upon university administrators to expel 2 to 3 students per day in an attempt to instrumentalize universities in a conflict that exists between society and government policy, not between society and universities, whereas Blais has publicly referred to students as children, whereas we recognize that the heavy-handed and paternalistic approach of the government in the face of student democracy will only exacerbate conflicts, as we have seen in 2012, whereas 2 students lost their vision in one eye in 2012 as a direct result of government repression, whereas the Ménard report commissioned by the provincial government essentially accuses the provincial government of exacerbating the conflict in 2012, whereas highlighting that no lessons have been learned on the part of the provincial government since 2012 as a result of the Ménard report. At a recent protest, 1 student has already been shot point blank in the face by a tear gas canister, and there have been numerous other unacceptable and egregious injuries to students and those acting in solidarity with students at protests. Whereas this context reveals the logic of repression that has filled the walls of UQAM, whereas success at UQAM on the part of the administration represents a superlative threat to student leaders that are upholding and will uphold democratic mandates of the respective associations at all universities in Quebec, including Concordia, whereas the judicialization of political questions, including the use of targeted expulsions against key and well-respected student leaders, and injunctions in lieu of democratic votes represent perversions of student democracy. Whereas according to the Quebec Superior Court regarding the recent Laurent Prou ruling, sorry my French is terrible, as paraphrased by the link, associations and assemblies preserve pluralism and ensure student representation in political debates. Of course they're referring to the provincial debates and whatnot. Whereas the Quebec Superior Court upheld the right for student associations to represent their membership directly, thus empowering students to uphold democratically derived mandates. Whereas many of our own members have put themselves similarly on the line in comparison to the UQAM 9 while upholding the mandates of associations that have been derived democratically. Be it resolved that the CSU take a position against the political expulsions of students at UQAM, as well as any comparable actions taken against student leaders at any other cégep or university. Be it resolved that the CSU demand the expulsions be overturned and the students be reinstated to their former positions within the university. Be it further resolved that the CSU generally take a position against using judicial means to solve political questions, specifically that the CSU take a position against the use of injunctions to forcefully end strikes in the place of local democratic votes.
Okay, is that for seconding? Yeah. Great. Would you go further motivate that?
Yeah, essentially people not unlike myself, not unlike some of you who are upholding democratic mandates from their student associations at UQAM, people who are sitting on the board of governors, their equivalent, people who are in positions across the university are being targeted 2 years after the fact, very conveniently 2 years later at the very beginning of the strike movement. Very conveniently at the same time as the government calling for people to expel students, very conveniently at the time when the police are also being extremely heavy-handed again. Essentially, what we're doing if we were to approve of this motion is to say that we recognize this as political targeting, and that we're not willing to allow the government or the powers that be to cut off the student movement at its head, or attempt to cut off the student movement at its head. And we'd be joining the 70,000 or so other students who have already taken a position on this issue through the representative body. And it's happening right now. It's a huge issue. I was just at UQAM today to see kind of what's going on there. The riot police were on campus. There's a lot of injunctions that are passing right now. The reason why, and I don't know if people are following this very closely or not, but this is happening very quickly in real time too. And essentially, because it's a gray area, legally speaking, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm giving my own personal opinion on this. And this is based off of a few articles and things like that I've been reading. It's easily exploitable to say, there's like an exploitable legal process to put injunctions in place which are essentially back to RICO legislation for students that are striking. It's not illegal to strike in Quebec for students. It says nowhere does it say that it's illegal for students to strike, and it's historically recognized and culturally recognized as a thing that happens. But it's a gray area because it doesn't explicitly say in the law that students can strike. So anyways, this is exploited, and instead of having people go through the democratic votes, which are obviously there, it was just upheld by there was just basically the courts of Quebec just said that students have avenues for making changes within their associations. It wasn't directly related to strikes, so I'm saying that this, by me saying that thus empowering students to uphold democratically derived mandates in relation to the Quebec court ruling. This is kind of because it's a gray area. We have to kind of make these statements, so we are reading this gray area as empowering us to strike, but then the government is being inconsistent, of course, and then allowing injunctions to happen. Anyways, this is a very confusing process, but what's happening is it's being polarized on one side with the highest escalation possible, expulsion of student leadership, and so we need to hit back with an equally firm statement saying that we're rejecting all these things, that this is not how democracy works, and you know, there are people in this room who have been putting themselves on the line similarly to these students, myself included, and certainly nobody deserves to be punished for upholding democratic mandates from their students. So.
All right, thank you. So Lucy, I do.
Yeah, it's not super relevant, but just to give an idea of the context of what's happening at UQAM as well. This is at least what's being reported through social media, at least as of about an hour ago. But apparently that the profs at UQAM are no longer recognizing the legitimacy of the rector after he has refused to stop the injunction. So this is something that even professors are recognizing is a violation of democratic process and action.
Thank you. Floor is open. A motion is available on the Facebook group. All right, well, if that exhausts discussion, unless somebody wants more time to go over it. Jason? I had this discussion before. Just wanted to express my desire, I don't know if this should take the form of a motion, that the preamble, all the whereases, remain together when this goes in the positions book to provide context. So normally I understand a resolution when it gets enacted, the whereases get dropped as per Robert's rules. I'm expressing my wish, if a motion is necessary, to keep all of this in its form, or at least to not drop the preamble. It can be reworded anyway, but I would like it to also be included in the position to provide context of the decision.
Okay.
Is that necessary for a motion, or did the executives agree?
Well, I mean, first, I think it sounds like a motion to amend. I'm not sure how procedurally I would advance, given that, as you say, as per Robert's rules, the whereases get dropped.
Notwithstanding that custom, I don't think it's a motion. I don't think I'm allowed to do that. But I would like to express my desire to notwithstand that custom.
Okay. That is a little nebulous. Ben, did you have a conversation with Jason about this?
I just really quickly wanted to add context. So we exist kind of outside of Robert's rules in a certain extent with the positions book, because what happens is we take the stuff that's passed at council, including the referendums that are passed, and then it's interpreted by council through the committee, and then essentially regurgitated into a position that will go into the positions book. So I don't think that we're bound by the Robert's rules in the sense that we would have to ignore the fact that we recognize this context. I think I'm sure Terry is about to say that the spirit of this is probably going to be integrated through the policy committee, very likely, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, let's find out, Terry.
Okay, I was just going to say the way the positions book articulates the positions of the organization, it makes reference to the minutes where the positions were adopted. So, you know, in those minutes it will make reference to the whereases. But I guess I caution against setting a precedent of kind of interpreting whereases as things that we would like to have in the positions book. I just feel that if we want something to be formally included in the positions book of CSU, that they should be included in the form of resolution.
Okay.
Just because it's already subjective in the way, you know, the wording gets put in, it gets checked by council through the consent agenda and stuff. I just don't know if we should be expanding it further. Yeah.
So as the positions book exists within the signing regulations as its own entity, then it is within the realm of possibility, but what Terry's saying is that that's maybe not the most favorable approach, given that it's also going to be referenced in the minutes, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes.
Okay. Terry, what's that?
Just to go back to Lynn's initial, just the content you were saying, has there been, since the incident of 2012, what's been the reaction from the government itself? What's their, have they responded? Have, like what, on their part, to their defense of what's been happening? Do we have any?
Yeah, Terry, speak to that.
Well, the Parti Québécois issued the ONR report, which basically pointed the finger back at the government itself while they were in power. The Liberal government, I would say, I'm quite, I'm pretty implicated, and I've been following very closely. Some could say that I'm, anyways, like I'm very implicated in the subject matter, but I would say that they have taken an approach of becoming even more heavy-handed, potentially, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because after they produced the law 78, which was the special law, which basically was the hammer coming down on student associations during the student strike. It had stuff like, oh, if you're a student leader or if you're a student union, you can be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars for breaking this law kind of thing, which would essentially economically cripple organizations. What happened after that is there were, I'm not sure if you're around, and sorry if this is pedantic, is there were essentially, let's say 14 or so different community groups that popped up spontaneously across Montreal and in different parts of Quebec. They were called Assemblée Populaire Autonome de Québec. Anyways, this was like a spontaneous occurrence that happened immediately after the law passed, and people came out with the casseroles on their porches and basically had protests in every single part of the city in all the different boroughs. So much so that the government, or the mayor at the time, Tremblay, I believe was his name, urged people to stay on their balconies, and of course they didn't stay on their balconies, they went into the streets. Yeah, so you would think that they would have learned from that, but it seems as though they're very insistent on pushing a certain ideological approach in order to kind of forward the cultural revolution that you could say Béchamp, which was the finance minister, had started around 2012, or anyways, of the previous Liberal government. It seems as though they think that forcefully putting it through is the only way to do it. That's my interpretation, because otherwise, how do you explain the police behavior, the mass kettlings that took place for the longest time? I mean, when we're talking about the behavior the police do with kettlings and things like this, like Ontario, they kettled for one weekend during the G20, and then they essentially had to apologize for kettling. In the UK, I'm pretty sure it was outlawed, and it's been a while since I've looked at this, but we have a position on this actually. It was taken because essentially in the UK it was outlawed after its use. I believe that there was a casualty that resulted because somebody, I think they had a heart attack, but it's been a long time since I've looked at the information. Needless to say, in Western, specifically like Anglo-Saxon countries, this is not a practice that is exactly, that people are typically proud of using, but the SPVM and the SQ, or not, anyways, the SPVM, Montreal Police, still continue to use this. It seems as though there is no level of political pressure that will stop them from doing this short of having the Liberals lose the next election, but of course it's in 3 years, so I think that we need to essentially assert ourselves and say that like this kind of behavior from the government is unacceptable. But I mean, it's effective repressive behavior. It psychologically affects people that go to them to the point like if I go to protest, like difficult for me to do work the next day. So I've had to make a choice to essentially not be participating on the level I would like to, but we have to make choices. Thank you.
Floor is open. Okay, if that exhausts conversation or debate, we can proceed to a vote. So those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that carries. Anything further on this point before we move on to point H?
It's been suggested that if this goes through, that I write an open letter. I'm not going to say that I'm necessarily going to, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility. So I'm just putting it out there in case people have comments about that. Yeah. Okay.
So this brings us to the last point on new substantive business, which is the AGM. And Ben, I believe you added some points, or? Oh.
Sure.
Okay, or Heather.
Yes, I motion that council holds an AGM April 30th, 2015.
Okay. That's the motion. Is there a seconder before we hear motivation? Thomas. Okay, go ahead.
We have to have a resolution from council about the exact date as to when the AGM is held. The standing regulations and the bylaws both point to April 30th or the end of April. Also, we already booked the space for April 30th, so that would be great. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I did.
Yeah, Joe?
What time, do you know specifically?
No specific time set yet, but 5 is one that's floating.
Target date, okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
5 to 9.
Point of information?
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have it booked from 5 to 9?
Care to respond?
I can't remember. I think that Yui booked it from 4 onwards, I believe, because there will be preparations necessary, as there will be food and, yeah, presentations and such.
Also, is this an AGM today here, or?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to go over the books. It'll be the audited books of the previous year, which this council has already gone through, but it's a chance for the membership to check it out. Also, it's an auditing tender process year for us, so that's when the auditors, the auditor tender process is happening right now. They'll be appointed and ratified at the AGM. And yeah, you'll see the executive's end of mandate report will also come then also.
Okay, Lucy, and then, okay, Lucy.
I guess just on this topic, not so much about the nitty-gritty of the date, but is there any strategy to do outreach for attendance at the AGM? This year, last year, I remember it just barely made quorum, even though it was a contentious election, and the CEO report was interesting.
Are you wanting to respond? Yeah. Go ahead.
So we spoke about this briefly today as an executive, and the quorum is 30, but we would like to surpass that substantially. So we're going to be using all the tools at the disposal of the CSU, so like the mailing list and having a Facebook page, and we're going to be putting posters up as well. But we do understand that this time around it is in a difficult time for students because of the examination period. Whereas last year it was a bit more favorable in the sense that the exam period ended earlier, but I still feel that we'll effectively communicate with students on the date and the location and the time, which hopefully council will approve today.
Thank you. And you also wanted to put yourself on the speakers list?
I just wanted to say that it's the last possible day that we can do it is on the 30th, so if people wanted to change it, they can only change it to holding it before the 30th of April. Yeah.
Marcus?
Just to confirm that I heard that our quorum is 30?
For the AGM. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How many students do we represent?
Several tens of thousands of students. Beth?
The AGM is not really like it's not the same as a general meeting, which our quorum, like a general assembly, the quorum is 450 for that. But for the annual general meeting, it's more of a receiving of documents. It's like housekeeping, like we hire an auditor, receive the CEO report and things like this. It's we don't take like motions from the floor, we're not going to pass a strike mandate, that sort of thing. It's really good.
Okay, if no one wants to speak, then we can proceed to a vote then. Those in favor of the motion to have the AGM organized on the 30th of April at 5 o'clock? Okay, please raise your placards. Okay, those opposed? Abstentions? All right, that carries. Did you get that okay? Great. Anything further on the point about the AGM? No, okay. All right, well, well, that takes us out of new business and into question period and business arising. So the floor is now open to public at large or for council to ask questions or mention new business. Beth?
I just wanted to talk about the Csu report and the Csu shareholders meeting, which I had personally said we would be having at this next meeting. I just wanted to say that from our perspective, it would make more sense to wait until next month when we have the business plan finalized from the consulting group, so that we can actually present something at the Csu report rather than simply having one for the purpose of having one. And then we have a report that's ready to go out. Pretty much finished. It's not completely finished, but we'll send it out for the next meeting. But yeah, it didn't really seem like it would be an efficient use of people's time to just have one right now, so we just kind of didn't do it.
Thanks. Okay. No questions, no business arising. That takes us to announcements then. Okay, a couple. Marcus and then Jason.
So, the occupation at UCAN is still going on, by all means. Anyone that wants to participate should. Right after this meeting, just head on over. And now that we have a motion supporting, people from being expelled or all that action being taken, you're insured to some degree.
All right, thanks. Marion. Jenna Perry.
Okay. So I'll also just mention UCAM is having a demo tomorrow afternoon also against the political repression and against austerity in the fossil fuel economy. And on an unrelated note, I'm in an urban clay class and we're doing urban art installations around the downtown campus in the next 2 weeks. So if you'd like to experience urban art in ceramics on campus, I would invite you to explore. That's it.
Thanks very much. Jason.
I'm founding a society of parliamentarians. Its goal will be to found, train, and instruct people in how to chair meetings, and additionally provide services to clubs to educate their members towards parliamentary procedure. I'm looking for founding members or anyone who has some spare time to help me with this, with the founding of this society. So if you're interested, please contact me after this meeting.
Lucy.
Conflict of interest time. I work for the campus radio station, but it's within the interest of, I think, people and student leaders on campus that we've just renovated our professional on-campus in-studio recording studio. It's extremely, extremely affordable for students, especially, and for community groups in general, but it's reduced rates for students, and essentially it's there as a professional capacity space to help, especially the projects of students and student artists and student creative people. So that exists at Loyola, and you can see it at any times during regular weekday office hours. But it's rad and it's shiny now.
There's going to be the final print sale from a whole bunch of clubs within the Fine Arts Department at the FOFA Gallery table, and it's going to be all day for the rest of the week. It's your last time to get affordable art from students.
Tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the Hive, we got a community public organizer from New York City to come do a talk about public organizing in New York City. It's going to be great. He's a really influential guy in all kinds of public housing initiatives and cooperatives and stuff like that in New York. And it'll be followed by a wine and cheese for the geography department. So if you guys like to come, sure you can come.
Gabe?
The Hive Cafe will be having a special general assembly next Thursday, which is April the 16th at 7 o'clock. You should have all gotten an invitation by email because I'm assuming you're all cooperative members. If not, check your emails. And yeah, you're all welcome to come. We're going to be going over the Hive, how it's been doing, giving updates both in general as well as financial, and electing the couple of missing seats from the board of directors. So you're all welcome to come.
Thank you. Jeremy, I do again?
Yeah, there's also another talk on Friday in the JMSB auditorium by K-Hole. and their approach is to analyze the intersections between trend forecasting, contemporary markets, and artist productions. Should be an interesting talk.
Okay. I don't want to be sentimental, but the next council is going to be our last council meeting.
For us.
Oh. All right. So I hope that we can all like have a fun little post-council bash. Okay, anyway. So yeah, just think about that, and if you can, try and like book a little bit of time after the meeting to socialize and things like that. Cool.
Very sweet, thank you.
Yeah.
Anthony, then Beth.
Yeah, so if people are interested in going to Quebec City for Saturday, let me know after this meeting. So the buses are going to be leaving at around 9:30 Saturday morning. There is a reservation list, but I can see what I can do about getting some people on. We're going to be coming around 9:30 at night. After the demonstration, there is going to be a talk in a very large auditorium titled Action Climate, like the demonstration United Against Hydrocarbons. And there's going to be some frontline activists speaking there and talking about what the next steps are in our movement to stop these projects and keep this stuff in the ground. So yeah, let me know. It should be a really good event, and we're looking at 6 buses of Concordia students leaving Saturday. It's going to be a huge contingent. It should be great energy.
I know that we've already unceremoniously congratulated the new CSU that won, but also Caitlin won her recent elections and Jason won his recent elections for positions, so I just wanted to congratulate them as well. It's really cool. Is there anybody else that recently won an election? Oh yeah, well we already answered that. Anyways, that's it.
If there's no further announcements, that takes us to adjournment. Marcus.
Yes. Move to adjourn.
Say motion to adjourn. Seconded. Jeremy, just all those in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.